Welcome, everybody. This is an introduction to awakening the sage within. And in this, we are sharing about these ancestral and indigenous ways of grief tending, these ways of gathering together, of understanding our own life stories from this an initiatory lens. And how do we begin to dialogue and receive our life and heal our past in a way that we become more embodied? That those stories of our life can be that which actually reinforce the gifts and the strengths we have to offer versus having these stories of our life that actually binds us. Because how many feel bound? How many find us in these self-defeating loops, whether it's relationships, health, or finances, and how those are all linked to stories? As Martin Shaw, fellow storyteller mythologist, says, bad storytelling casts spells. Good storytelling breaks spells. So we're here to break the spells of our own stories and relearn the stories in a way that they help us bloom into the potential and the expression that is wanting to basically dream through us. If you're new to me, my name is Chivito Koa, translates as little gold crow, and this is a name that my own elders and my own teachers have playfully given to me. And I help facilitate a cultural community called Tree of Totems. It's a community of misfits and nature lovers, both indigenous and non-indigenous, people from all over the world in different cultures who are gathering together to piece back these cultural ways, these kinds of rites of passage that helps us make these shifts from one life stage into the other, and how to see the deeper meanings and relationships that are at play, and also inviting us further in. Because you can see how in today's world where we are so fractured and there's so much brokenness, there's a lot we carry within that we've never been able to have the elders and mentors there to help us process and move through it. So instead of becoming more empowered, we end up becoming more limited by our experiences. So here we're going to share, how do we break free from those limitations and come back into this ancestral view that breaks us back open and reinforces that which we have to offer and to express and be in the world. And because we are sharing from a traditional way, we always begin with a form of beauty making, where we're calling in the spirits. We are bringing our hearts and our minds into the space with that which is ready to speak to us. See, we share this through a traditional way, which is the oral tradition. We're not here to impart information, but instead we provide the stories and the conversations, the language in which stirs these remembrances that are yet held in your bone memory, and that which is going to uniquely speak to you. So that way, what I share here will be unique for you and has specific medicine that's just for you. Okay. So with that, I'm going to share with a poem by David White called Sweet Darkness. And I would love to invite you to invite yourself to come close in and be present, and ask yourself, how present are you willing to be with your life right now, and with what's wanting to be spoken to you, through these stories, through this dialogue. Okay. So close your eyes for a moment and just listen into your own body. Take in a deep inhalation. As you exhale, allow yourself to fully arrive. And feel into where these words take you, where you find yourself in them, what gets stirred within. It's called Sweet Darkness by David White. When your eyes are tired, when your eyes are tired, the world is tired also. When your vision has gone, no part of the world can find you. When your vision has gone, no part of the world can find you. Time to go into the dark. Time to go into the dark where the night has eyes to recognize its own. Time to go into the dark where the night has eyes to recognize its own. There you can be sure. There you can be sure you are not beyond love. You are not beyond love. The dark will be your home tonight. The night will give you a horizon further than you can see. The night will give you a horizon further than you can see. You must learn one thing. You must learn one thing. The world was made to be free in. Give up all the other worlds except to the one to which you belong. Give up all the other worlds except to the one which you belong. Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn. Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn. Anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you. Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn. Anything or anyone that does not make you come alive is too small for you. David White. Feel into those words and what they bring up for you. When there comes a time in our life when we step through an invisible doorway and we stand looking out at a very different kind of horizon than the one we saw in our youthful decades. Right? You're finding yourself in a landscape that is familiar, but it feels very foreign. In your youth, you had all these different ideas and these visions of what your life was going to hold for you. And now that you have climbed up the mountain far enough, you've climbed and treaded the path of life far enough, right? And you have acquired experience, right? You now have a new vantage point. You can look back on your life from a very different lens. And you can see how now you're in the space where there's that sense of needing to will life to happen is now giving way to a deeper desire of authenticity and connection, relationship. We each come to a moment when you feel in your bones. You feel in your bones you must let go of all the other worlds except to the one which you belong. In other words, you arrive in this new moment where you are no longer interested in having the trivial conversations or interactions that don't directly feed you. And because you have loved, you have experienced loss. Because you have loved, you have experienced loss. And that accompanied grief, if you are willing, can now offer you these deeper layers of feeling and being in the world, right? Anything else just seems superficial. So you can no longer deny the greater calling and expression that is just trembling beneath the surface of your being, this movement toward a greater authenticity with who and what you want to bring into your life. And you feel you must answer and make this shift away from anything that does not make you feel authentic. Because if you do not, Because if you do not, you can feel this slow, silent death creep in. And with all that's happening in the world, there's a tremendous amount of grieving occurring both openly and silently. You know, all the anger, all the anxieties, the fears, right? All this within our social upheaval right now. And these are all expressions of deep grieving without having the cultural ways of processing our grief and letting it become something useful, something constructive. So we ask, how do we navigate these times? How do we not only navigate these times, but how do we also honor our grief in a good way and allow it to be a doorway into a greater, authentic, textual layers of our life? How do we let these deep feelings become useful and empowering, something that can bring change within ourselves and help us bloom into something greater than that which is binding us and limiting us? So here we are, where we are gaining entrance into this new room of life, where these questions are greeting us, right? These questions, these new questions that are inviting us into these other conversations that may both terrify and inspire us. And what we see is that, we have long been waiting for the right questions to reveal themselves. Been waiting for the right questions to reveal themselves and hence offer the conversations that we have actually longed to be a part of within ourselves. Some of these questions to offer you now is, where are you now? You've began your journey long ago, and there's this horizon that's yet extending out in front of you. So between these points, where are you right now? Go into that question. Where are you being called to lean into right now? And where are you going? As Mary Oliver asked, what are you going to do with the rest of your one wild, precious life? Who are you yet to grow into? What life experiences and opportunities are yet beckoning, inviting you in? So where are you going for the rest of your one wild, precious life? And where did you come from? This is one of the most important questions, the one we're really leaning into. What path has led you to be where you are right now? It's in this latter question that opens you up to be broken open into the true gifts that your life has afforded you, and it is so excited for you to finally claim, to receive the real stories of your life. So where did you come from? When we take the moment to pause and reflect on the journey that you have traveled thus far, and you tap into these rich layers of feelings, you avail yourself to the deeper meanings of your life. When we pause and let the voices of our past be heard from a new narrative, when we let the voices of our past be heard from a new narrative or a new narrator, right? That we allow ourselves to see these experiences from this new vantage point, from an ancestral lens of where you are now, you find you're able to step into what we call your medicine, right? That is your unique gifts, your unique strengths, unique understanding, the unique spirit in which you embody in this life. And we find that if we don't pause and reflect, we find our past becomes a weight, a bag of talking heads that we sling over our shoulders And those heads are narrating from the voice of the inner critic, from shame, from regret, failed expectations, all these things we've accumulated over our life. And they tell these stories that bind us and reinforce our sense of unworthiness, keep us in these self-defeating loops over and over again. So what we find is that today we no longer have the cultural practices of gathering around the fire. We no longer have the elders, no longer have the grief tending rituals. We no longer have the customs of coming close in and listening into our stories, learning to tell our stories, where we both allow our grief and the beauty and all the lessons move through us, integrate within us, and let us come out as something new. Instead of maturing into your gifts, the weight of your life, your wounds, regrets, failed expectations, build walls around your gifts, and they chain you into a more diminished capacity of living, of seeing. Hence, we can see how we have this large population of elderly with few actual elders, few who've matured into the wisdom of their life. And we see fewer and fewer becoming elders. So we see whole generations merely aging and adopting a mindset of having a diminished capacity and becoming seemingly more and more irrelevant. Where is our place in the world now? Where will it be in 5 years, 10 years? We each reach this moment in our life when we are presented this opportunity to do the harvest. We receive the call to come in, and it's like this calling. The calling to come in. It's felt, and it's something that needs to be answered. Right? There's a time to come in where you harvest your life and you tend to the soil of your inner landscape. So you may be deliberate with how you grow, with what you're planting, with a sense of nourishing your life to mature and grow into the vision you may yet have for yourself, that your life has yet for you. But what we see is in our modern Western colonized systems, right? This programming, we have been conditioned to only look forward. We've been conditioned to just get over it, just to push through, to move on. Right? So there's a wound there in that pushing on and not allowing ourselves the space to be with, what is ready to speak with us, change us, integrate within us. Because we don't allow that integration, we become more severed, what indigenous cultures call becoming soul loss. And so this is part of that Western colonized based mindset. And in that, you can see how we've actually fallen out of relationship with our lives, with our own stories. We've lost our ability to access these deeper meanings that are available in your life experiences if we but adopt this indigenous ancestral lens. It's time to break the spells. So the elders have long shared that the gateway into the real meanings of our life isn't found in our experiences, but in the reflections of our experiences. They share that your mistakes, the struggles, our wounds that we experience are all good things, for they reveal what our life uniquely brought us closer in with, what new strengths, understandings, skills were going to be harvested in there, matured into. And therefore, it was culturally known that through our descents, we were being initiated by life. When life redirected us, it wasn't because we failed or we were unworthy or inadequate, but it was because life has a greater vision than what we could see. One of my favorite quotes is, the dreams you have for yourself are too small for you. But the dreams and visions that life has ready for you are far greater than what you can see. So there's this way of coming back and seeing a greater intelligence in the movement of your life. And you can see how this is in stark contrast to our modern times that expects you to be like this cog in a machine wheel that's always operating at the same level, that's always in this state of affluence, that never breaks down. But that's how we get broken down instead of broken open. And so we say, we're now in a time that it's a journey to go into the dark. As in the poem, it shares, time to go into the dark, where the night has eyes to recognize its own. There you can be sure you are not beyond love. There you can be sure you are not beyond love. So what we find when we harvest our life is that the stories we carry of guilt and shame, our wounds, our regrets, those stories are all kind of used as a way to reinforce our own sense of unworthiness. But through this ancestral indigenous lens, when you harvest the gifts within these same experiences, you discover that these same experiences hold the stories that validate your worth. They validate your worth and are a testament to the medicine you carry because you went through that. You experienced that. You harvested certain gifts, strengths, and understandings from that. And when you know that story from that, no one can ever take that away. And so you gain a strength of spirit and a new sense of authenticity with who you are. And so we want to go into the dark because that's where you discover that you are not beyond love. The love has actually always been there. And that's a powerful healing moment. But to get there, we need to do the harvest through an ancestral way. Restore these cultural ways of grief tending, of understanding that restores ourselves back into the originality of it all. Can you sense how important it is to do this? The fall equinox, we're about to enter the fall equinox, and that's a doorway that gives us entrance into what's called the seasons of shadows. Across the world, the fall equinox is known as this time we enter the descent of the seasons, where we enter old winter's hut. And so we're joining nature in withdrawing within itself. I'm sure you can already feel like autumn coming, feeling the sense of pulling coming inside of ourselves. That's part of that call. So traditionally across the world, culturally, it was a time that we would gather around the fire, gather with the elders, gather with our clansmen, and we would share our stories of the previous year. And through the sharing of our stories, we each would draw out unique gifts. We would get new insight, new understanding. We'd gather together to do rituals for grief tending, for reconciliation. It was a time of healing wounds, healing relationships, as well as honing in our own gifts so that we may step into the new year without the burdens of life and with the gifts our life has offered us. So you can feel what a sweet and nourishing, powerful time it is. So we would gather around the fire. We would participate in these rituals, dances, songs, these feasts, these ways that move these unspoken part of us into our center so the medicine can be part of us as we release the rest. And of course, many reflecting their past has a sense of revisiting their shadows, right? Wounds, regrets, failed expectations, stories of shame. And it can be scary to enter those. We've taken a lot of these stories, we've tucked them into these cardboard boxes and then placed them beneath the floorboards of our closet and shut the door, never to attend to again. So we don't want to necessarily go there, right? But you can see when we keep them there, however, we find we end up with a limited view of the horizon. But when you pull them out, and you listen into these stories from these other narrators, right? That of the warrior, that of the healer, of the elder, of the child spirit, we find you gain a greater, more expansive view of the horizon and your understanding of yourself and what you went through. And it's about what you're doing is you're reclaiming your stories. See, the night will give you a horizon further than you can see. Our shadows will break us open into a greater horizon. And of course, many fear visiting their wounds and their stories of their past. We each carry a lot of grief, and we carry that grief because we have loved. When I first started grief tending, I was terrified of it. Thought I would get swallowed into this deep well of grief. But it was there when I learned how to grief tend and carry my grief with me in a beautiful way. I feel like I got entrance into the rest of my life, my full life. There's this beautiful poem I love. And it goes, "'Tis a fearful thing to love. 'Tis a fearful thing to love what death can touch, what can be lost. 'Tis a fearful thing to love what death can touch, what can be lost. Oh, to hope, to love, to dream, and oh, to lose. A thing for fools, this love. Thing for fools, this love, but a holy thing to love what death can touch." Mm. Perhaps you can sense how we are getting pulled into these more authentic layers of ourselves. We're giving permission to hold that which is truly beautiful, which oftentimes in our society has maybe been shamed or hasn't been very accepted for us to go into. Many native control cultures say we become flat people. We have a very narrow range of what we can express or where we're supposed to be. But when you can break that superficial layer, you come into these real depths of relatedness, and we retrieve all the parts of our soul, and we blossom into this greater fullness and this authenticity of self. So we want to ask, fill into this question. What stories and experiences in your life are inhibiting you right now? And maybe you don't know exactly which stories they are, what wounds there are, but you can see, where do you find yourself caught in these self-defeating loops you go through, like in relationships, health, or finances, because within those is a story that is binding you. Where has your unprocessed grief taken root in you and is now binding you? And really consider the impact it'll have to be free from these limiting stories, to reclaim your stories that give you a strength and confidence and a way of walking in your medicine. Consider knowing your medicine stories. Consider how hard it is to do this work alone. How doing it alone is part of our Western colonized conditioning that sabotages us because we're always looking at our own eyes. So we often don't see what's right there in front of us. And it's so easy for us just to collapse into our emotions, collapse into our triggers, collapse into our stories and not hear it from the other narrative. So it becomes dangerous to do it on our own. Culturally, it was known we were never meant to do this inner work alone. You're meant to gather together around the fire in a sacred way and listen into the stories that help us remember our strengths and understandings, that gives us insight into that which is ready to be seen, right? To shift our grief from a weight into a kind of beauty we carry because we have loved. And hence to be part of these grief tending rituals, these ceremonies, learning how to carry our grief, how to know and tell our own stories. So we're breaking free from our shame and our guilt, which are really just stories based upon this colonized condition of what we're supposed to measure up to that is unrealistic. And so we can come close into these inner huts and heal where we have shame and guilt that is blocking us from the relationships and the love that we really want to have. And so we find these other hidden stories that gives us growth, that reveals our perseverance, our courage. you are resonating with any of this, I want to invite you in to be a part of our circles. We are gathering together twice a month starting October 4th. We're restoring these ancestral ways where through beauty making, through the storytelling, through the oral tradition, we are coming together to learn how to basically decolonize our view, our minds and our eyesights, and look from this indigenous ancestral lens, this initiatory lens of our life, where we get to come and see from a raven's eye view, the movement of our life, the misdirections, the people who've come in and left, the struggles, the griefs, the success, the celebrations, and you get to see the fullness of that story. And in that, you heal from so many wounds. You break free from these stories that cast spells, and you come into this new way of being with yourself. So we gather around twice a month, the first and the third Tuesday of each month. And you get to gather people from all over the world who are as committed to coming into an authentic space of sharing, of listening, of learning to ask the new questions, those questions that are been calling to us, waiting for us to ask. And within the circles, we have elders and we have mentors. We have the stories. We have the rituals. And we move from fall equinox down into the descent to the solstice. And then we make the sense of emerging back up as the sun emerges back up towards the spring equinox. So we're trailing the movement and influences of the seasons as our ancestors once did. So this is a really powerful and nourishing journey that breaks us open in the ways we are ready to be broken open. If you feel called, I want to invite you to reach out to me and email me at learning@treeoftotems.com and introduce yourself and why this resonates. This is an invite-only journey, and it's invite-only because we're very select with who we invite into the circles, that we have that authenticity and we have a sacred and safe space to share. After your introduction, we'll schedule a call where we can talk one-on-one and just connect a little further. And then we invite you into the circle. If you want more information, just go to treeoftotems.com and look under Awakening the Sage Within in our upcoming events. And reach out. I would be honored to be of service and invite you in. Om. Gratitude.